And amen. I'm excited for what I have today. I'm actually always excited for what I have. Maybe it's just me, but I think it's some good stuff. But the title this morning, and if you could put a timer to help me, but the title this morning, I kind of posed it into a question, and the question is, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? Right? That's pretty cool. What would Jesus do? And I love this question because it brings back so many memories. There's just so many memories about it. And I remember as a young boy kind of always seeing the W.W.J.D. You guys remember that? Right? And I hope it doesn't age me, but I remember seeing it as a boy and seeing that question as W.W.J.D. And at that time, everybody was wearing the bracelets. People were buying the T-shirts. As a matter of fact, the last time I saw it, all right, because how many of you have seen it recently? Kind of don't see those things, though. I'm going to tell you why. I got a whole story about this. I got a whole theory about why we don't see W.W.J.D. and amongst a bunch of things. But the last time I saw this was on a bumper of a car. On a bumper of a car. How many of you remember the bumper stickers? When's the last time you've seen a bumper sticker? On an old car, right? Don't get out the old cars, Joyce. But when I was younger, right? And I'm going to tell you why you see the bumper stickers on the old cars. We just thought differently back then. It was just different. And when I was younger, cars always had, like, you were known by your bumper sticker. When you were behind someone, some people tried to have the coolest bumper stickers. Some people tried to have, like, some real creative stuff. So every time you would drive, when I was younger, you would see the bumper stickers behind the cars. But here's why they had bumper stickers behind the cars. I'm going to tell you why. And what's the difference between how time changes. Back in the day, and maybe this was just around my neighborhood, but back in the day, people owned their cars. Nowadays, people are financing or leasing them. And maybe it was just because I was broke. And I'm not saying there was no financing or leasing back when I was younger. But it seemed like everybody I knew owned their car. So when you own your car, right? And owning the car means you paid for it. It's yours. Even if you paid $300 for it, it's yours. When you own the car, you kind of do whatever you feel like doing to the car. No one's going to pick it up. No one's going to take it from you. And so people would put bumper stickers all over the cars because they own it. And nowadays, you don't see bumper stickers on cars no more. The only thing that you see pretty much on the cars nowadays is a piece of leather or a mat coming out the back of the trunk to protect those who can't park. So if you can't park, the mat was designed for you, right, from hitting each other's bumpers. Another reason why is because bumpers are made differently, right? Remember back in the day when they used to have the black bumper? It's like a rubber. Nowadays, the bumper's a part of your car, right? So you can't put no stickers on it, right? So that's kind of the closest you see. Another thing you see is what they traded for and it'll make sense, just flow with me. What they traded for the bumper stickers, right, are the little families that they put on the back of the windows. You guys see those nowadays, right? I saw a dog one time on there. You know, it started off with like the father, the mother, the siblings, and then I saw a dog. They're starting to change it up. There's some photos you don't even want to see. They're starting to get a little nasty. But that's not the point, right? They kind of traded the bumper stickers, right? Because now you don't own the car, so now you put the little sticky on the back of the window. So now that's all you see, and I found that to be funny because back then I would see the W.W.J.Ds on all of the cars. And isn't it crazy how times change? Like how back then it used to be, but now it's like so different. Everyone has their new car. As a matter of fact, when you see an old car, you kind of point it out, right? But back in the day, it was better. When I had my car, we ain't gonna talk about those issues. But you see, there's a twofold part to that question. What would Jesus do? And I want you to understand exactly where I'm going, because the sermon is not about what would Jesus do, but it's a question that I'm posing to you. But there's a two-part fold to that question, and the first one is the first reason why that question. I'm making this up, so please do not try to Wikipedia this and Google it and say that's not what it was for, Pastor. I'm making this up, but it was real when it existed. It was real when that question was posed, and the first part of that question was for a Christian. And this is the reason why you would use that, because you would pull that question out your pocket when you needed it. The first reason why they would have that question of what would Jesus do is because it was meant to stop you who serve Christ from doing something you would regret. That's what it was for. You know when someone cut you off and you was ready to cuss them out? And then that passenger is like, yo, what would Jesus do? That's what it was about. You was about to get into a fight because somebody messed you up. They like, man. And then you had your sister or your cousin like, yo, what would Jesus do? And it kind of caused you to say, you know, you lucky. You lucky Jesus wouldn't have fought you, because if he would have fought you, I would have fought you. But that was the first part. The second part of it was kind of similar, so don't look at me and say, well, technically it's the same thing. But the second part of it was to help guide believers on how to do things from here on out, right? And so the question was like something that kind of stuck in your conscience. What would Jesus do? Every time you were getting ready to do something way before, it's like, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? And that question was apparently supposed to help you, guide you through some things. And if you didn't have that question when you were younger, no wonder you got into so many fights. I'm just teasing you. But when I really start to think about our world today, when I think about our world today and everything that you hear on the news and everything that exists in our communities and everything that has happened, when I think about that while at the same time thinking about this question of what would Jesus do, I can't help but think that Jesus was just a tad bit more effective. And I'm lying, he was a lot more effective. When I think about the world today, coupled with that question of what would Jesus do, I can't help but think about that if Jesus were doing what needed to be done, this world would be just a little bit better. You guys agree with me? Right? And you know that Jesus was just this guy that just did the right things. I mean, Jesus did a lot of things that were not popular, but was effective. Right? When we think about what would Jesus do, you got to kind of start thinking about what did Jesus do? And Jesus always did things that weren't as popular nowadays. Like for an example, Jesus back in the day, he healed someone on the Sabbath. Right? And that was kind of unpopular, right? The Sabbath was kind of a day that was designated to a people as sacred. You couldn't work, you couldn't do nothing. Right? You couldn't do nothing. But Jesus, he decides, you know, when you think about that question, what would Jesus do? We find ourselves on a Sabbath day, and Jesus, not really caring about what everyone else is doing, Jesus just does the right thing. Jesus does the thing that helps. And so on the Sabbath, Jesus goes ahead and he works by healing, right? Something that you weren't supposed to do. Jesus also walked through the town of Samaria. Right? And if you're not too sure what that meant back in the day, the Jewish people and the Samaritans, they never mixed. Right? They never really mixed. And so Jesus, rather than, if he needed to get to his destination, rather than going around a city, around a town, he went through it. He went through it because there was someone there that his people did not communicate with. They wouldn't communicate with them. Right? You know the war that has to exist for you to avoid, like, if your mom lives, right, like, on the next block, right? And you know those towns that, you know when you live at the edge of a town where it's like, you know, this is Paterson, but across the street is Prospect Park, right? And you know the war that's got to go through your mind if you went around, rather than going through Prospect Park to just get across the street, you went around the highway, came all the way around through a different way just to get to the Prospect Park. You know the war that has to have been going on. But Jesus, when you think about the question, what would he do? He didn't do what everyone else was doing. He decided, you know something? I'm going to walk through where most people wouldn't walk through just to help somebody that's in need of help. And so Jesus would do things different. I just got a couple more for you. Jesus also took the sin of humanity upon himself. Right? Something that he didn't have to do. He took what belonged to you. He took what you've done and he kind of put it on himself. And he also healed a man with leprosy. Right? And I know that these are extravagant examples. It's like, well, you know, I don't know if I could do that. You know, but Jesus healed a man with leprosy. And those having leprosy back then kind of excommunicated you from a community. You couldn't just be around, you know, having leprosy. I don't want my kids to get that. I'm not trying to get that. And back then, they probably didn't have the masks that they use nowadays when they don't want to get infections and stuff. But Jesus, he heals a man with leprosy. These are things that people weren't doing, because when you think about the question, what would Jesus do? He just kind of did it different, right? He kind of did things differently. Not only did he heal someone with leprosy, but Jesus took it a step farther. Jesus, when he was choosing his team, his squad, when he was choosing his group, He was building something. He says, I got to choose a group. When Jesus chose the group, what Jesus did was he picked the most unqualified people to join his group. Here he is deciding, I'm going to change the world. And he chooses the most unqualified individuals. Individuals that people wouldn't look past. They wouldn't care. They wouldn't. You know when you see somebody with potential and you're like, man, like, yo, right? And we look at people like they can sing and we're like, yo, how don't you got your record? Or we look at someone who's athletic and you're like, yo, how are you not in the NBA? And we look at other people who are so good at certain things. And Jesus looked at people that everyone just kind of just went by and he didn't even notice. They didn't even notice. And he looks at them. And so Jesus, if you get my drift, he just does things different. That's why when you ask that question, what would Jesus do? And I know you must be thinking, what in the world does that have to do with the plant you got sitting up there? It'll make sense. Just stick with me. I just want you to focus on the one thing. That Jesus, when you would ask that question, what would Jesus do? He just did things differently. Jesus was just different. And the funny thing is that in every one of these situations, Jesus made things better. That's why when I said at the beginning, when I think about the world that we exist in now, and I think about the question of what would Jesus do, and had Jesus been here now, presently, physically, like if he didn't come during the time that he came, but he came in 2017 with the issues that are going on now, Jesus would make some things better. He'd make some people better because he was just different. But here's the problem with that same question. After we exposed Jesus and we talked about how good he was, here's the problem with the W.W.J.D. How many of you think there's a problem with that question? No? Some of y'all looking like y'all don't care. But check this out. Here's the problem, because you can get excited at the same time, but you got to notice some things. And I noticed an issue with this question. Here's the problem with that. With the question of what would Jesus do? The problem with that question is that when Jesus was around, they didn't have things like social media. So when you ask that question, what would Jesus do? You can't do this. Like, what would Jesus do if like this person went on Facebook and was talking about me? Like, what would he do? Well, I don't know. Jesus didn't have Facebook. Jesus didn't have Snapchat. He didn't have those things. And so you're limited with those questions like what would Jesus... See, you only know what Jesus would do when you saw Jesus do what he was doing. But if he was doing something different, you kind of don't know. And so back then, the type of drugs that they had weren't the type of drugs that we got today. I mean, you read the Bible and you see a bunch of people drunk. But nowadays, you know, you got people doing the weirdest things. Sniffing horse pills. I mean, I don't know what's happening right now. They're doing things that you shouldn't be doing. You know, they're doing things, they're taking pills that you swallow and they're sniffing them. I mean, there's some stuff that's going on. Back then, they didn't have the belt, you know, the heroin. They didn't have those things, right? At least I hope they didn't. The Bible doesn't really talk about it. But we invent drugs nowadays. We come up with some things. I know there was a time where people were smoking embalming fluid. And that's like, what? You put that in dead people. Why would you? What would Jesus do? I don't know. They weren't doing that. I mean, I know back in the day they wrap you up, but that goes in dead people. There's some things you shouldn't be doing. But that's not the point. But the point is that, you know, things were different. Like Jesus wasn't walking down the street to meet like 8 churches on one block. I mean, things were different. And so when you ask that question, what would Jesus do? My problem with that is that Jesus wasn't in every single situation. Jesus was in certain situations. And so rather than that question of what would Jesus do, and this is where this is going to make sense to you because the title of it was, what would Jesus do? But I got a better question for you. And not that wasn't a good question. And just so that you know, that question of what would Jesus do actually started in 1990. So if you remember that, it shows how old you were. 1990, some of y'all like, I was 30. I'm playing. I was like 2. But that was the problem, right? That was kind of the problem with that question. And rather than ask that question of what would Jesus do, I got a better question. And you may not think it's a better question, but I can guarantee you it is a better question. So rather than asking what would Jesus do, I think it's better to ask how did Jesus do it? Not what he did, because you know what he did, but unless you are in that situation, unless you come across someone with leprosy, you know that Jesus what? He healed them, right? Some of us ain't got a Sabbath. Like, what is a Sabbath? Because on Saturday, I'm still thinking about my job. On Sunday, I got things to do. Because I don't want to do it on the weekday, I got more work on the week. Nah, I'm not exposing you guys. But check this out. Some of us ain't got a Sabbath. We don't operate, right? Not all of us operate like I'm not doing nothing on a Saturday or on a Sunday, or if your Sabbath is on a Wednesday, whatever your Sabbath is, right? But we know what Jesus did on the Sabbath, right? He wasn't lazy. I'm not telling you guys that you can't be lazy. Netflixing it out on a day you ain't go to work. But Jesus was healing on the Sabbath. He was telling people, get up from your situation and start walking. He was commanding people to do things. And so you kind of knew what Jesus was doing. But the better question is Jesus, how'd you do it? How'd you stay so consistent? Jesus, how is it that you always knew what to do, even if it was different from what everyone else was doing? How is that? And that's the better question to ask, because if you ask the right question, you'll get the better answer. Not just an answer so that you know and you're like intelligent, but an answer so that you can actually take and apply and do the same things. Because we know that Jesus made things better. We know that Jesus made things better. And so we got to ask the question of, Jesus, how'd you make better choices? How'd you make others better, Lord? Like, how was that possible? Because I know these people annoyed you. And they did some things that would have ticked you off, like, forget road rage. You know, they did some things, boy. They blamed you for some things, and you still was able to love them. You still was able, you sat with people that the world pushed away. You fought for people who didn't fight for themselves, who didn't care about you or where you came from or what you was about to do. But Jesus somehow mustered up in him the ability to just do it right. And so that's the question that I want to ask you today. Is how did you do it? You see, when people question Jesus, and I'm going somewhere with it, just stick with me. 48 minutes. When people question Jesus, he'd always say this one thing. Every time somebody questioned anything that he did, he'd always say this one thing, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. He'd always say this. He's always like, look, I get you're confused at what I'm talking about, but I'm only saying what my Father tells me to say. And every time Jesus did something, he said the same. He had like the same response. He's like, look, I get you're upset, and you don't agree with the principles, and you don't agree with the methods of how I'm doing it, but I'm telling you, my dad's always working, and I am too. And I'm only doing what my dad is doing. That's all I'm doing. And there was just this connection with Jesus and what he was doing. And he'd say things like the Father and me are one. And back in the days, that was uncommon. How dare you connect to God? How dare you say that you are one with God? Nowadays, we're afraid to say that because we live under the pretension that we are imperfect beings. And so we wouldn't say I'm perfect. Right? You don't go around telling people that, because the moment you got a mistake, they want to point it out. But Jesus was like, me and the Father are one. You can't be afraid to say, me and the Father are one. Back then, right, it was like, and that's why they hated Jesus, because they was like, how dare you? You ever have somebody that had a God complex? How dare you? Or someone that tried to act like you know their secret. You're like, don't make me expose you in front of people. Don't do it. I know we're all here and you look happy, but I know about last night. Nah, that's the Netflix show I was watching. It was weird. But check this out, right? Back then it was like uncommon, and so they looked at him like, how dare you compare yourself to God? But Jesus had a secret. He had a secret, and I want to give you that secret. Because if we are to do some things that are going to be worth it, if we're going to do some things that are going to be uncommon, if we're going to do some things that are going to change the world, then we got to do it differently. One of my favorite leader or how do I say it? He's not only one of my favorite authors nowadays, but he's someone I look up to. Although I have met him, but I didn't meet him like that. I took a picture with him. It's Craig Groeschel, and he says something that is so powerful, and he says it to his church, and he says, if we're gonna be right what others are not, then we must be willing to do what others are not willing to do. So if you want to change the world, you can't do what everybody's doing. You got to be willing to do the opposite. Or that's actually a bad one. Don't do the opposite. But you got to be willing to do something different, because some of y'all might take it to another whole level. You said do the opposite. He smacked him, I punched him. It was the same thing. But you got to be willing to do. See, Jesus was willing to do what others weren't willing to do, because he wanted to bring change in the world. And the way that he brought change was by doing what others weren't willing to do. And so that's what I want to implore on you this morning, is that you got to be willing to do that. But I want to give you the secret, because it's all in the secret. If you figure out the secret, it's easy. It's very, very easy, because what this world needs is some what would Jesus do people. What this world needs is, what would Mauricio do? What would Naj do? What would Jesse do? That's what the world needs. If we could figure out the secret. And so I want to show you the secret. There was a secret. It's a secret. Don't tell nobody. And it's found in John 15. And I promise you I won't be too long. But I am going to tell you, I break promises just in case. But I won't be too long. Right? His secret was found in John 15, 1 through 7. And I want to dive into that. And I guarantee you, I hope you like it, but I guarantee you I love it. And here's the thing about this. And I know you guys are quiet and you guys are wondering what was the secret, but there's a secret. And I want to share with you the secret, because if you can grasp onto the secret, I guarantee you that all of your decisions and everything that you do, it will be worth something. It will mean something. It will change people. It will change the world. If we are to change the world, then we got to figure out. And some of y'all trying to read the secret. I see you, Joyce, trying to read the secret. It's the secret. Stop reading it. I'm just messing with you. Some of y'all interested, like, well, what secret is this? Because y'all nosy. That's why it's not even about the secret. It's the fact that we're nosy. But there was a secret, and I want you in on the secret, because you got to start working as hard as you're working, but you got to start working, right? Not harder, but smarter. And Jesus understood his role in the whole scheme of things. And watch this. Watch this. Let's read it. John 15, and I'm reading from the NLT translation, right? Amen. I was gonna mess with y'all, but I got time. I ain't got time. I gotta keep going. But check this out. Check this out. It says, I am the grapevine, and this is Jesus. I am the grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. Go to the next one. It says, he cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce what? Even more. Even more. And it says here, you have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Watch this, because this is the big one. This is the secret. This is the secret. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. And it says here, for a branch cannot produce a fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. You got that, right? A branch can't produce fruit if it is severed. You can't produce fruit if you're not in me. But he says, remain in me, and I'll what? Remain in you. Remain in me, and I'll remain in you. Now watch what he says. He says, yes, I am the vine. He's confirming it. You are the branches. Now he's really breaking it down for you. He's like, I'm the vine. You are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them, it's the same thing, will produce what? Much fruit. For apart from me, what can you do? Nothing. Nothing. And it says, anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. And before we go to the next, I just want to just clarify some things, because I know some people are watching. That was not talking about hell. Just in case, because when you grew up, you knew that if you were thrown to the fire, you would throw. I just want you to realize that Jesus is talking about a gardening experience. And normally when you create firewood, what do you use? Dry wood, right? You use dry wood. So if it's not connected, it falls. It's dry. It's good, right? Anyway, right? So watch this last part of it. Watch this. And it says, but if you what? remain. It's all about remaining, right? In me, and my words what? My words remain in you. You may do what? Ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. I love this. I love this. And that is the secret that I am going to reveal to you in the next hour. I love it. Some of y'all like, let's stop playing. Junior's like, yo, the Cavs play at 1. You got to hurry up. But he says, remain in me and I will remain in you. I want to show you 4 elements of this secret, 4 truths about this. I want you to know 4 things that you are to know about this particular verse or couple of verses. The first thing you must recognize is that there is a gardener. That's number 1. You got to recognize there is a gardener. The second one that you must recognize is that there is a true grapevine. So the first one is there's a gardener. The second one is there is a true grapevine. The third one is there exist some branches. And the fourth one is there is some fruit. You guys got that? First part of it is that there is a gardener. The second part of it is that there is what? True grapevine. Wasn't there like a commercial with that? Maybe not, right? The second one is that you are the true grapevine. The third one is that there is a branch. And the fourth one is so you got to know all 4 things if you are to change the what? World. If you are to change the world, you must know there is a gardener, there is a true grapevine, there is a branch, and there is a fruit. And you got to know all 4 of these things. And these are the things that I'm going to try to rush through because my time's running out. And I'm going to try to give it to you. But the gist of it is remain in me and I will remain in you. Jesus constantly said, me and the Father are one. I'm connected to him. I only do what he says to do. That's all I'm doing. If he says it, I'm going to say it because I'm connected. Because Jesus knew how to remain in who? The Father. And the Father knew how to do what? Remain in him. And they somehow worked it out and the world was different. Amen. I'm done. But you must know that there is the gardener. And just for my presentation, right? Don't laugh and don't think it's funny. But this is not a grapevine, and I get it. But for the sake of my presentation, this is a garden. So I want you to dig back into your 5-year-old days when you could imagine the world. And I want you to imagine this to be a grapevine because I couldn't find a grapevine. It'd take me years. We could make this into a garden. I mean, I can go that far, but you might not hear that message till like 2020. But this is a garden, and I want to use this as a prop to kind of guide you. And I'm not even joking. The timer just renewed itself. I don't know where I'm at. I'm just joking. It did, but don't look back. I got you guys. My points are ready. I'm ready. But I'm going to use this as an illustration because I want you to pay attention because there's some important principles that we can draw from this, right? And the first one is that I want you to know when we read that passage, it says, I am the true grapevine, but it says that my father, say with me, my father is the gardener. My father is the gardener. Go ahead, say it loud and proud. My father is the gardener. That's an important truth. I want you to know that a gardener knows how to make things grow. It's important that your father is the gardener because a gardener knows how to what? They know how to grow crop. They know the ins and outs. How many of you are gardeners? You lying. But a gardener knows how to make things grow. Here's another truth about a gardener. Because it's important that you have a gardener if you're going to produce some fruit, right? A gardener knows how to make things grow. A gardener will always protect his garden. You know, when I was a young kid, we had this little backyard, right? But most of it, my sister can probably remember this, most of it was like a driveway. It was like a driveway to the garage. And we had this little tiny section, and it was a lot of things. It was one time a basketball court, although it was about from right here to about here. And there was nothing but dust there. And my mom got it in her mind to decide, I'm going to make a garden. And when you live in the rough part of town, you can do what? A garden? And my mom was growing like tomatoes and eggplants and stuff like that. And she had like this little fence, I guess. And she was like trying to make this garden. I don't even know how it worked, but she made it work. Right? And you could play in the backyard, but don't get caught with the ball in the garden and you got to go over it and step on things to grab it. Because it wouldn't work. If you smash a tomato, if you right? And because of the soil, if you put like a footprint, it shows it. So you got to kind of go back in there. And so it's important for you to know about the gardener, because the gardener will always protect his garden. The gardener will always do this. He'd always tend his garden. It's important that you know what a gardener does, because his role, his function, and Jesus was like, my Father's the gardener. My Father knows how to make things grow. My Father knows how to do that. My Father will always protect his what? Garden. My Father always does what? He tends the garden, because if you're going to make the garden grow, you got to tend it. Right? Nowadays, we got like the fancy stuff. We have like what are the sprinklers? They come out, you time them. Back in the day, they didn't have that. You had to water your own garden. Some people don't even want that technology. But the gardener will always tend his garden. Here's another thing that the gardener does. A gardener also knows how to prune his vines. He knows how to prune his vines. This is what the verse said. The verse said here, look at what it says. It says, he cuts off every branch of mine that does not produce fruit, and he prunes the branches. He prunes the branches that do not bear fruit, so they produce even more. And it says, and I'm going to read it again, he cuts off every branch of mine that does not produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so that they could produce even more. How many of you know what it means to prune something? I knew Joyce was a gardener at heart. I knew it. She was like this. You guys didn't see it, but she was like, you know, you put up them spirit fingers. She wanted to go like this, but she was like, I've been pruning. That word is important, right? It's important. Joyce is going to kill me after my sermon. Lord, protect me. Right? That word is important, because it says that the gardener, he cuts off and I want you to imagine that this is a grapevine, right? I want you to imagine that this is a grapevine, right? Now here's the thing about a grapevine. A grapevine took 3 years to grow. There was a process that doesn't make sense to me. How many of you guys have ever seen the movie, I was about to say Castaway, that was a sad movie. But how many of you guys ever seen Karate Kid? You guys seen Karate Kid? Everybody seen Karate Kid? Right? Remember in Karate Kid where like Mr. Miyagi was cutting the bonsai tree? It's like, why are you cutting the tree? It looks beautiful. But why was he cutting it? He was taking care of it. He had to make sure that it grew healthy. And so here the Bible says, right, because sometimes we look at it like it's such a negative thing. But here's what the gardener does. The gardener knows how to protect what's his. The gardener not only knows how to protect what's his, but he knows how to make it grow. And he knows, if he knows how to make it grow, he also knows what does not make it grow. And because he protects his things, he changes some things. And so now I got my scissors because I'm the gardener. And here's my illustration, because you're looking at your garden and you get mad at what God is doing. But here, he's the gardener and he knows how to make it grow. And he's like, I cut some things off that are not producing. You know that in some grapevines, after a year, the branches turns real brown. And what happens is you gotta cut that branch. You gotta cut some things off of it, right? You gotta cut some things off. As a matter of fact, he says here that he not only cuts it, but he cuts it so that it can grow healthy. And that doesn't make any sense, right? If you're gardening for the first time, you ain't touching nothing. You're telling the whole neighborhood, look at my flower. Oh, it's looking good. But someone who's good at it says, look, you got some things on the side you need to cut. You got some things on the side you need to cut, and I want you to understand this principle, and I'm going to try to rush through this so that you could understand it. But I want you to understand this principle because we have this picture of God, that my life, it sucks, and I come to Jesus, and now my life is good. And then you go through some things, and you can't understand it. And the reason why you can't understand it is because what you didn't know was that the Father is a gardener. And as a gardener, he cuts some things off of your life that you may not see that will prevent you from growing. As a gardener, he tends his garden. He takes so good care of you that he's not going to let you grow. He's going to what? Help you grow. And so as a gardener, this is what he does. Now it looks good. It looks like, and I bought this at ShopRite. I figure you guys are the church and you're my church and I love you guys and we're family, so I might as well tell you the truth. It didn't look like this. I did some cutting last night. It looked nice. But it was only a $10 plant. Don't worry about it. Now, check this out. And this is what a gardener does. A gardener, now he looks at his stuff and he starts, because this is what happens with grapevines. With grapevines, what happens is if you allow it to grow on its own, right, kind of all the branches, what they do is they kind of grow intertwined. And what happens is when the fruit starts to grow, it gets bad because it can't grow like that. That's why if you've ever seen a grapevine, they're sticks, right? Because they got to allow the vines to kind of grow in different directions. And I couldn't find a grapevine at ShopRite. They didn't have it. This is my grapevine. And so this is what the gardener does. And what he does, he looks at it. I should have had like a Miyagi suit, right? Just got to make you guys laugh somehow. But a gardener, he looks at it and he's like, man, this needs to grow. And so he starts cutting some things. And it seems like when he cuts, that was a big one. It seems like when he cuts, he's taking things away from you. And he's like, man, that's good. That looks better. And what happens is you don't understand it because you're just a branch. But Jesus is like, I am the vine. And so my Father tends me and he takes care of me. And so he cuts some things off. And not only does he cut, he's like, look, this is my garden. My garden's got to look nice. And so, like, this used to be a part of the garden. This is, right? But that's like no good. Because what a gardener does, he takes care of his own. He wants to make sure that it grows. And I wish I had some sticks. Just thought about that right now. Make some vines out of it. But a gardener goes in and he's like, man, this one look good. It's kind of dying. And he's like, I don't need that anymore. Because what a gardener does is he goes in and he cleans some things. And I want you to know that God is going to cut some things out your life. Because he's a gardener, not because he's trying to take away from you, but because he wants to tend to you. He wants to take care of you. That's what a gardener does. And so the process of pruning involves cutting. But cutting does not necessarily mean that he's cutting because it's no good. He's cutting because it has to grow right. And because he's the gardener, he knows how to grow it. He knows what doesn't look healthy. And you see, the pruning process is the most important part of the process, because if you don't do this right, you can damage the whole crop. That's the most important part. And I love that, because you know who has that part? God. My Father. He's the gardener. And so he's got this down packed, and he's like, I gotta take this. But you see, that's why you can't rush your life, because the pruning process takes years. You don't just grow overnight. You don't just become from Thursday to Monday. It takes years for the pruning process. And that's why when it feels like you are headed nowhere, when it feels like, God, when are you showing up? God, it seems like I've been losing rather than gaining. God's like, you're in the pruning process. You're in the pruning process. And it takes some time, but I'm getting rid of some things in your life that will cause you to grow the wrong way, because I want to cut them out so that you can grow just a little bit healthier. If you stick with me, you'll see what I could actually grow. Why? I'm the gardener. I'm the gardener. And I take care of you. And I know that you must be like, don't take this away. And I'm like, look, this isn't away. Don't take this away. But God's like, look, I need space because my vines, I gotta align them. It's just you're too bunched up. It's too crowded in here. And what the gardener does, he tends it. He makes sure that he does it right. And we can take this just a little step farther, but I don't want to confuse some of you, but I'm going to say it anyway. Because the gardener, he waters it. But one day we'll get into a deeper message about who Holy Spirit is in your life. But the gardener waters it. Holy Spirit is a type of water. He's a type of thing that's poured into you. But we'll talk about that another time, I guarantee you. That's what a gardener does, and the pruning process takes some time, but I'm almost done. I got to get through the other processes to get you to realize that it's easy. But you got to remain in me, and I got to what? Remain in you, right? And check this out, right? That's the gardener. And we can stay on the gardener. I could tell you a bunch about the gardener, but I want to move on because you got to know your place and you got to know your role in the scheme of things, because Jesus knew his role. That's why Jesus makes a statement. He's like, whatever the Father gives me, no one can snatch. Why? The Father's the gardener. The Father knows what to give me. The Father knows what belongs to me. The Father knows what's going to grow in me. And that's why when he gives me you, ain't nobody snatching you from my hands. Why? The gardener put you there. But watch this next one. Watch this next one. The Bible says that Jesus starts off by saying, I am the true grapevine, and I don't want to get into it too much. But the reason why he says I am the true grapevine is because back then Israel was considered a vine. But they they kind of messed up. But he's like, I'm the true grapevine. But I want you to know that nowadays you got some things in your life that want to be the true grapevine. But Jesus is like, nah, I am the true grapevine. And I want to tell you some things about the true grapevine. And I want you to know that Jesus was the true one. See, the true grapevine was tended by the gardener. That's why what's most important in your life is not all these other things. It has to be the true grapevine. And this is why the true grapevine has to take precedence over everything in your life. Because here's the thing about the true grapevine. He is tended by who? The gardener. But we want to put things in our lives that come before the true grapevine, but there's no one tending what you've put in front of him. Our job is first. We want to secure that job. We want to secure our money. We want to secure our things. And we make that first. We make that our true grapevine. Because that is where we draw our what? Source from. And the reason why I'm using the true grapevine is because the branch grows from what? The grapevine. But Jesus has to be the true grapevine because the gardener tends who? You? No, the true grapevine. The gardener is taking care of who? The true grapevine. And you are connected to who? The true grapevine. And so the true grapevine is tended by the gardener. The true grapevine, Jesus, was connected to the gardener. He wasn't trying to do things on his own. That's why Jesus always says, I'm only doing what the Father showed me to do. I'm only saying what he told me to say. I'm connected to him. He is my gardener. If he tells me this is how you got to grow, then that's the way I'm going to grow. If he tells me you got to cut this out, then I'm cutting this out. If he tells me you got to do this, then I got to do it. Why? He's the one that knows how to grow. I'm just a true grapevine. Just a few more things. Without the gardener, the true grapevine wouldn't survive. But without the true grapevine, the gardener would not have ways to pick his fruits. See how they need each other? The gardener can't pick fruits if there is no grapevine. But the grapevine can't grow properly if there is no one tending him. And so they kind of stay connected. And that's why Jesus is like, I am the true grapevine, but my Father is the what? He's the gardener. Now let's get on to the branch because I ain't got a lot of time left. The branch. Here's the thing about the branch. You're the branch. Go ahead and say I'm a branch. I just messing with you guys, but you are the branch. Here's the thing about the branch, and you may not like this, but you gotta like it. You gotta accept it. You may not like it, but the branch is useless. The branch is weak. The branch can't really do anything. I mean, what can you do as a branch? I mean, if you don't have fruit, you're kind of pointless. And I don't mean to say this in a negative way. I don't mean to give it a negative connotation, right? I'm just trying to tell you that the branch has a responsibility, and it's not to just be a branch. It's to be connected to who? The grapevine. And so the branch within itself is kind of useless. It's weak, but the branch, if connected to the grapevine, can do what? Produce fruit. But the branch can't produce fruit on its own. The branch needs the grapevine. But the branch doesn't just need the grapevine needs a gardener. So if the gardener's in place and the grapevine is in place and the branch is connected to it, then the branch can produce what? So you can produce more things in your life than what you think. But the only way to produce those things is that you got to be tied to who? The grapevine. You got to know your order. You can't get to the gardener without the grapevine. That's why the Son says no one can get to who? The Father without going through who? Me. Why? He's the gardener. I'm the grapevine. You're the branch. You're an extension of me, but I'm an extension of my Father. If you want to get to my Father, you got to get through me. Why? He tends me. And if he tends me, he's tending you. And if he tends me and tending you, then he's going to cause you to grow some things that you couldn't grow on your own. That's the branch. The branch needs the vine in order to function to its full potential. If you are to function in your full potential, you can't just be satisfied with just being a branch. Because what happens to just a branch? It gets thrown away. Why? It's useless. But another thing that happens to the branch is that the branch is good, but sometimes the Father cuts a little bit of it. He's like, I want this to grow healthier, and I kind of saw you growing in a different direction. And you're too close to the other one, so I got to kind of separate you. Because he knows how to grow his garden. But the branch is useless on its own, but connected to the vine, the branch could do amazing things. And it's like, what would Jesus do? My question is, what would Lee do? What would Lee do if she was connected to the vine who was being tended by the garden? Lee would produce fruit. Last one is the fruit, and I'm almost done. And I went over, but you guys get my drift. Forgive me, the timer went off. I lost track. The fruit. Here's the thing about the fruit. That the fruit is the result of the branch that was connected to the vine. I'm sorry. The fruit is the benefit or the connection or it's what's connected to the vine who's connected to the gardener. I mean, it all makes sense some way, but you got to know your role. Are you the fruit? No, you're the branch. Who produces the what fruit? So the fruit is the result of the branch connected to the vine who is tended by the gardener. The fruit is important. But the fruit can't be if you are not connected to the grapevine. And that can't be if the grapevine isn't being tended by the Father. And what I love about this is that God orchestrates this entire thing. And he's like, you can't survive on your own. My son can't either. My son needs me, but you need my son. That's why Jesus saves you. He's the grapevine. You're his branch. That's why he died for you. He's the grapevine. You're the branch. And he knows that you got some fruit in you. And he wants to produce that fruit in you. And that's why he died. Why? So you can stay connected to him. Because when he won death, he won that connectivity. He brought you right back. He connected you right back because you were disconnected at one point. But he's like, I'm going to die for them so I can reconnect them so they can bear the right fruit because he loves you, because he's your grapevine. Anytime you think about Jesus, say, he's my grapevine. Here's the thing about the fruit, is that the fruit is not for the branch. The fruit is not for the branch. The fruit is for others. Here's why I got this bag. I'm not gonna lie, we were selling this bag, but it's a nice brown bag, so I figure. But the fruit isn't for the branch. The branch produces the fruit. The branch doesn't eat the fruit. Who do you think the fruit is for? For people. Naj was like humans. Gotta stay off the sci-fi, Naj. Gotta stay off the sci-fi. Humans. Not aliens. It's for humans. Homo sapiens. No, let's go on with the message. But the fruit is for people. The fruit is for people. And there's a reason why you need to produce the fruit, is because everything that you do is for somebody else. Everything that you do is for somebody else. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. When you learn how to be the branch who's connected to the grapevine, when you learn how to do that, and the grapevine, when everything's just kind of functioning in order, you can come through, we're good. When everything is functioning in order, when the gardener is tending his garden and he's tending the grapevine, and you become the branch, and you as a branch is connected. And Junior's gonna kill me because he's got to edit this sermon, and it's more than 40 minutes. But June, I love you. I got to get my point, though. I got to get my point, and just walk with me just a little bit because I'm almost done. But when you are just a branch, but you're not just a branch, you learn how to be connected to your grapevine, who's Christ, and Christ he's tended by the gardener, who is God, and everything works, and you produce a fruit. But the fruit isn't for you. The fruit is for someone else. The fruit is for someone else. That's why Jesus was able to impact the world, because he had something to what? Give the world. You got something to give the world, but you can't give it if you're not producing. And you can't produce if you're not connected to the grapevine. And if the grapevine isn't connected to the gardener, then the grapevine can't produce the branch who can produce the fruit. Everything has to be interconnected. That's why he says, you got to remain in me, and I'll remain what? In you. And if I remain in you, and you remain in me, then you will produce what you were called to produce. But so now I am this branch, and I'm connected to the grapevine, but the fruit that I grow isn't for me. Someone else eats that fruit. Someone else does it. And that's why you can't be selfish. You got to go help the world. Why? Because if you are connected to the grapevine, then you produce fruit. But as a branch, the fruit ain't for you to eat. It's for somebody else. And so this is what happens when you produce the fruit. Now look, this fruit didn't come from this. Because I know what y'all thinking. That's a plant. For illustrative purposes, this is a garden. Stick with me. Because I know what y'all thinking. Don't be laughing. And this is a big bag, and I ain't got a lot, but check this out. Check this out. Check this out. This is what happens. This is what happens. I'm the branch. So I give off some stuff. Right? Can I show everybody what I just gave you as a branch? Can anybody tell me what this is? Nectar. Nectar. Now this is a potato. It's a potato. And let me ask you a question. Would you cook with this potato? Lee, you got to cut this out, Lee. But here's what happens is that as branches, when we're not connected right, we want to give this to people and we think they're going to grow with this. This don't look yummy. This kind of don't look right. And what happens is when we're the branches, we think we got a lot to give to the world. And so what we do is we just give an extension of who we are and we give somebody a branch, but what are they going to do with that? But when you learn how to be connected to the grapevine, you produce the right fruit that's going to help somebody else. When you're connected to the grapevine, rather than give someone something that's empty, you give them something that's full. When you're connected to the grapevine, what you do is you give people some things that can help and nourish their life. But if you are, don't be mad because you ain't get an apple. But if you are connected to the grapevine, you start to give off some things that make sense because the fruit is not for you, it's for someone else to eat. But you can't expect to change the world by giving them something that wasn't even fully developed. You can't say that I'm going to change the world because I attend church and God is like, but you're not connected to the grapevine. That's why you're giving off some branches because all you're giving people is what's falling off of you. But when you give something, or when you give someone something that is satisfying, you can change some things. And I want you guys to do what? I want you to change some things. I don't want you to be given this. Because you know what? This is not that you can't, that all you do is produce this, is that you're only producing this because you may not have let it grow, or it might have just sat there too long and you ain't give it to nobody. Because that potato was good at the beginning, but after sitting there and no one touching it, it just kind of got wrinkled. But Jesus is like, you produce fruit if you're connected to the grapevine, and the grapevine is giving you the juice that you need because I'm the gardener who waters the grapevine, and I take care of that. And I want to read something to you as I close. I want to read something to you, and I'm closing. I'm done. I guarantee you we're over. But I want to read this to you anyway. Because some people might be watching this and they may be wondering, what would Jesus do? But who is Jesus? And I found like this little snippet of an article that it just made so much sense. So this may not be for you, but this may be for someone. But it says here, before asking what would Jesus do, we must truly ask, who is Jesus? Is Jesus merely a historical figure? Is he a good man? Is he a good teacher? Is he like this guy that was pretty cool and he just did some amazing things? Or is he a prophet? Or is he God incarnate who came to the earth about 2,000 years ago to die for the sins of all mankind? Who is this guy named Jesus? And it says here that Jesus asked his disciples this very same question. He's like, who do people say that I am? Who are people saying that I am? That might not have been for you, but it might have been for you, because I want to ask you that question is, who is Jesus? Is he your grapevine? Is he yours? Is he your grapevine, or is he just a prophet? Or is he just a man that did some amazing things? Or is he somebody you wish you could be? I mean, who is this guy called Jesus? Because he asked his disciples the same question as they were walking with him. He's like, well, who are people saying that I am? Because some are saying that you are the Messiah. Some are saying that you are this. But he's like, well, who are you saying that I am? Why would he ask them that question? Because he knew that what they believed about him would have a significant bearing on how they would live their lives. what they believed about him would have a significant bearing. What you believe about Christ would have a significant bearing on how you live your life. If you don't believe that he is your grapevine, if you don't believe that it's possible for you to be connected to him, if you don't believe, if you keep looking at the things that you've done and you keep saying to yourself and convincing to yourself that you are not good enough for God, you are not good enough for Christ, I want you to know that you are not the gardener. You need to know your place. You are just a branch. It's the gardener who removes. It's not the branch who just decides to fall. It's the gardener who tends it. But you got to know that. You got to know that who you believe that Christ is in your life would have a significant bearing on how you carry yourself. If we believe Jesus for who he claims to be, and this is the article, I don't want you to think I'm making this stuff up, and for what he did on earth, then we can truly accept him as, here it says Lord and Savior, but I want to say as a grapevine. He will then come into our lives and reveal himself to us in spirit, allowing us to genuinely ask the question, what would Jesus do? If you can see him as the grapevine, and just to give you a quick synopsis of what we just kind of went through, God is the gardener. He tends, he protects it, he removes things that are not growing because it's his garden, so he does some things that he wants to make sure that his garden is growing the right way. And sometimes he cuts some things because part of the gardener's responsibility is to prune it. And pruning it means I got to cut some things off sometimes. You may not understand it, but the reason why I'm cutting is because you got to grow healthy. It doesn't make sense to take away so that you can grow, but God says, my ways are higher than your ways and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. And because I designed this world, I know how it works and I know how it operates. And I know that everything that you've been carrying, you can't continue to carry. Why? It's too much weight. So I got to separate you. I got to separate some things in your life because I'm the gardener, but Christ becomes that grapevine, and the grapevine just stays there waiting for the gardener to kind of cut some things and to shape them and to form them so that things to grow. And we are the branches. The branch by itself can't do anything, but if the branch is constantly connected to the vine, although sometimes the branch is being cut because the gardener is tending it. If the branch stays connected to the grapevine, the branch can produce a fruit, and the fruit is not for the branch. The fruit is for others. It's so that you can bless others. I want you to know that this world needs what would Jesus do more than they need what you do. They need what would Jesus do, but they need you to replace Jesus with your name because you are connected to him. If you stay connected to the true vine who is connected to the gardener, then you will produce the right fruit during the right time, which in turn will impact the world. Look at your neighbor and say, know your role. It's important to know your role and stop thinking you're the grapevine and stop thinking you're the gardener and stop making your own choices. Just stay connected, he says. I just need you to stay connected. Everything else will work out itself. I want to leave you with just this. The Bible says in Galatians 5:22-23, and one day we'll talk about this, but it talks about the fruits that you can produce as a branch. And these are some of the fruits. It says love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are words that are good. Could you imagine if the world got a piece of that? Could you imagine if what you gave the world was not gossip, was not criticism, was not casting into hell? Could you imagine what you gave the world was love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and you showed them that you could actually practice self-control because you've been remaining in the vine who will give you a fruit. And what you're giving the world is not something that will kill them. It's not things that they will walk away from. It's something that will help them, because if you eat a fruit in your life, it's good for you. Stop giving the world just anything. Give them the fruit that you can produce if you stay connected. Because he says this morning, if you remain in me and I remain in you, you could ask me whatever you want. If you remain in me and I remain in you, he says, apart from me, you can do nothing. If you remain in him. Well, if you are watching this video, if you don't know who Jesus is, if you don't know, and we pose the question, what would Jesus do? I want you to know that to be connected to the grapevine is easy. It's not about a bunch of things that you do. It's about your heart. It's about what you could believe. And I want you to know that Jesus wasn't just this guy who came to die. He didn't just do those things. Jesus was this guy who was committed to his Father. And because he was committed to his Father, he was committed to you. And the reason why he came to die for you is because he wanted to reattach you to himself. Because he believes in you more than you tend to believe in yourself. He doesn't think that you could produce because your environment was very good. He doesn't think that you could produce because you had an education, or because you just made the right choices. He knows that you can produce because his Father knows how to grow. His Father's the gardener. And so if you want to know this grapevine, if you want to reattach yourself, if you want to connect yourself, I just want you to repeat these things after me. I want you to say with me in your heart. You don't have to say it so others can hear it. You just got to believe it in your heart. And it may not make sense to you, but it's okay, because he's the grapevine. I want you to say this with me if you're watching this. Say, Lord, forgive me. Forgive me for my way of thinking. Forgive me for thinking that I could do it on my own. Forgive me for quitting because I thought I could do it on my own, and I kept falling. And I want you to say with me, say, Lord, I want you to come into my life. I know there's more inside of me, deep down inside, but it's been locked down so deep I can't pull it out myself. As a matter of fact, I don't think I can produce it. But according to what you were talking about today, I can produce it. But I got to stay connected to you. And I want you to say, Lord, I want you to come into my life and prune me. Take away those things that I don't need and help me grow. I want to receive you into my heart. You know, if you prayed that prayer with me today, I want to welcome you